Welcome everyone to today's Coffee and Bites lecture, organized by the Science Library at the University of Bern. Our today's guest is Gino Caspari. Thank you very much, Gino, for being here today.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to give the talk, Aline. So maybe to start is how I got involved with this whole Instagram thing. And that was about 3 years ago now that I was sitting at a campfire during one of my field research campaigns in Siberia. And someone brought up the topic and was like, well, we have a pretty decently interesting life. And, there might be people interested in what we are actually doing as researchers in the field. And I'm coming from the area of archaeology. And in our area, we always kind of ask ourselves a little bit, it's like, what's the reason we're doing our research, and what larger impact do we have on a general audience? And I always had looked at sort of social media rather critically. Wasn't a big fan, considered mostly a waste of time. But I let myself convince and actually started a small science communication project. And this has, in the meantime, kind of blown up. I have now over 140,000 people, and actually a small community who regularly learns about archaeology online. And I was actually really surprised by the interest that people had in the subject and all the questions that were coming from a very large audience internationally. And that was the thing that kind of kept me going and made it feel like it was worthwhile continuing this effort. And so maybe for people who are interested themselves in starting something in the area of science communication, I think the most important thing overall is that you pick a format that you like, that you feel comfortable with it, and you can actually pursue this over a longer period of time. Because science communication is just a long-term effort. Like, people don't just learn from one post. Like, they come back to you time and time again, and over time they develop a more nuanced understanding of a subject matter. So why should we communicate individually? After all, there are institutions out there that have professional communication departments. Universities have really gotten into that, and it's become a lot more important over the past years. But there's some reasons why you should actually go out there as a researcher yourself. The first ones are related to intrinsic motivation. It's just nice to actually get out of the ivory tower, talk to people, talk to a broader audience, and let people take part in the expertise that you've acquired over the years. And you get to talk about topics that you're passionate about. So that is a joy in itself. And in my experience, it's been largely positive feedback. Of course, online environments can be toxic, but that's something that we can talk about later on. What it has also resulted in is that I got to meet and bond with a lot of people that I would have otherwise never met, that I got new perspectives on my own research, that I had interesting questions popping up, and people who see things differently than you might see them as in your general scientific academic environment. The second set of factors relate more to extrinsic motivation. It is hugely beneficial to just get your work out and get it seen by people. This doesn't have to be like a direct impact that you're funded through social media or through promoting some sort of garbage products, right? But it has like a sort of indirect feedback loop effect that you're sometimes being invited to talks. Sometimes it can help you to actually acquire funding. And after all, people and also scientists do inform themselves sometimes on social media. So sometimes people actually hear or read about your papers first on social media on their daily feed. And ultimately, that can lead to citations, which was a surprising effect. I didn't really think about that when I started this. One thing it also helps immensely with is actually honing your communication skills. Because as we're all climbing the academic ladder, we're supposed to communicate at some point, and we get into a situation where it's important that we don't make mistakes in communication. And nobody is really prepared for that. It isn't really featured in our curricula. And so actually learning that skill and making these mistakes early on can actually help you a lot in avoid these mistakes when it really matters. And then in the end, what is really also becoming more of a focus is that science communication is factoring into funding decisions. And funding agencies are looking out for people who are good at communicating. So it can actually increase your chances of getting grants and getting funding for your research. You know, institutions are out there. They have professional communications departments. But in all likelihood, you are probably more effective at communicating with a broader audience than institutions are. Here on the right side, you see sort of what the engagement rates are that you can expect from an audience on Instagram. So an engagement rate where either people comment or somehow interact with the posts you make. And engagement rates at institutional accounts, despite them having often many followers, are usually below average. So despite them having all the means and the people and the resources, one could argue they're not doing the greatest job at actually communicating with a broader audience. Now, what you do effectively with communicating your science to a broader audience is you're building communities and you're establishing trust, which I think you could argue is more important than ever, that people actually start understanding how science works. I recently conducted a small poll asking people just very general questions about, you know, reliability of information, about trust in the information that they see on my account. And I was also checking on whether they were actually able to take it a step further and start learning themselves. And the results were actually really nice. So most people actually trust the information that scientists provide out there. A lot of them go a step further and then start researching, or at least looking up additional information themselves. And you actually change the perception that people have of your field over time. So a lot of people follow me for a year or even more and really stick with the account, regularly engage and learn about archaeology. And then in the end, you know, as you see, it's just nice to kind of have access to a community where you can just post a story, make a poll, and then within 24 hours have almost 12,000 people answer your survey. So to some overall general suggestions of what you should do if you're just starting out communicating to a broader audience on a social media platform. One thing that is extremely important is creating a niche and thinking about who your target audience is. In most cases, you don't really have to reinvent the wheel. You can look at competitors in your niche and you see what works. You see what kind of posts work, and you can kind of provide your own twist on a topic. It is really important to contribute regularly, to post regularly. Most successful accounts post at least every other day, ideally every day. And that, of course, is a commitment time-wise. I would recommend that, especially at the beginning, you try not to overdo it. Try to develop a schedule that you can actually stick with and something that is achievable also over the long term. It doesn't really help you if you're extremely motivated at the beginning and then you post, 7 times a week, and then after 3 months or so, you run out of materials and you run out of motivation because maybe it's not going as well as you expected. And then you break off the entire experiment. Rather try to go for quality content fewer times a week, but try to stick with a certain regularity. Then this seems intuitive, but I think it's sometimes important to say that like social media posts are not scientific publications. You have to make an effort to break things down for people. It's a place where you can show opinion, where you can show perspective, and where you can give your personal take to something. And you can still be open to criticism and suggestions from the outside. That is something that I kind of struggled with at the beginning a little bit, because most experts, I guess, overestimate the amount of knowledge that people have about their field. So sometimes the very, very basic concepts that you have to explain, and there is a certain degree of oversimplification that necessarily comes in. And you can clear that up if it comes up in the comments and things like that. But ultimately, showing part of who you are and what your experience is as a researcher and as a scientist is important to people, because people follow people. That's part of the reason why institutional accounts don't fare as well, even though they have the budget and the resources. People are interested in the human experience. Lastly, be aware of the power dynamics surrounding communicating with a broader audience, creating a community, and all of a sudden having a broader reach. Because with 140,000 people, I'm now a voice in the field of archaeology. And this attention exposure is really valuable. So now that I'm sort of in this position, I try to feature other projects. I try to feature other research and people who conduct field research in different regions through regular live streams and things like that. So it's important to then, once you have sort of the power, to also share this, because otherwise you run the risk of having people criticize you, a lot of colleagues getting jealous, maybe because academia is, as you know, a competitive environment, and attention and exposure are just valuable assets in also promoting your individual career. And with that, I think we can open up for questions.